Good morning.
Good morning.
I chose the green grass background because I thought it represented liver fairly well as far as green goes. I don't know that that's appropriate, but of all the backgrounds I've got downloaded, it seemed the most fitting as far as I was concerned. This morning, Dr. Grobe, Dr. Mystique, and I are talking about love your liver. And I guess my first, I was driving into work and I'm thinking, um, isn't the heart the most important? I mean, obviously that's what pumps the blood and it sends blood to the brain. And we always think of the heart. We're always concerned about heart health. But really, if my recollection is correct, in Chinese medicine, the liver is far more important, kind of, sort of, maybe, or that's my impression, than or equal to the heart. And so please help clear up my misconception if that's where my brain is at this morning.
Well, in a sense, you're right that it's one of the most essential because it has so many functions in the body that a lot of times when you trace back a problem or illness or disease, it comes back to the liver as the origin or the place to remove the obstacle to healing. So the liver, you can function for a long, long, long time with a very toxic liver or damaged liver or part of a liver, but you're not going to live very long if you have no liver. And so then it's equal in weight to the heart, which of course, if you can't pump the blood, you're dead, you pass. And starting with the brain usually, and then other places. But the liver has a part in circulation, it has a part in hormones, it has a part in cholesterol metabolism, digestion, detoxing. Of course, it's the organ that protects us from all the things that come in, all the insults that come in into our body. Our blood pressure can be regulated by it. A lot of people think that's a heart issue, and it's not exclusively. Sometimes it's a liver issue, sometimes it's a kidney issue. There's different aspects to blood pressure. And the liver affects blood quality, the nutrition that's in the blood. So does the gut. So the liver has so many overlaps with multiple areas in the body that you can run pretty well with dysfunction, but at some point, you're not going to run at all if the liver can't keep up with what's coming in or needs to happen. The great thing about the liver is it's regenerative. So it's almost never too late to do something, almost never. And I say almost just because there are places where just the burden is too much and we just can't overcome it. But uh, really, we have a long time where we can turn things around. We really can.
Well, in our work that we've been doing with people that have had their ancestry or their 23andMe DNA, and we take the raw data and we plug it into the software, and it shows us where the as I refer to them, the blockages. So here's I call it, here's the crappy cards you were dealt, with the genetic SNPs, the SNPs that are blockages or partial blockages, and that can really kind of slow you down a bit. But understanding, I think, even in a small part of how the liver works and can become more efficient, and we know, from at least I know, and those of us in the medical field know, that the liver, as you're saying, is very regenerative. You can donate part of a liver and still be okay. You can there's it's very hopeful to know that even if you've been dealt some crappy cards, you're pro-inflammation, you have a family history of something. Understanding how you can take care of the liver, take care of inflammation, that may ultimately help you in the longevity of your life and leading a very healthy life in some of the choices that you make. Uh, and it doesn't have to be difficult. I mean, nor expensive.
Correct. It can be very simple. It can be nutritional or dietary. It can be supporting with topical treatments like castor oil packs over the liver when you feel pain. Um, it can be juicing. It can They're simple as the herb milk thistle. Milk thistle, in a way, is kind of like a multivitamin for your liver. That's simplifying greatly, but like we would take a daily vitamin or a multivitamin for just to make sure we're covering all the nooks and crannies that we might not get with our diet. The milk thistle can just assist the liver a little bit every day or every time you take a dose, and it's a way to help you be more efficient at the liver functions, so that you don't let things accumulate. And you can take the same thing, the same milk thistle, for example, and create a detox. It just is dose dependent. So the more milk thistle you take, the more you can push a detox. Now, you don't always want to do that. Sometimes you got to look at what's down the road after the liver as far as what function you're trying to address, but you can assist it. And that's why there's multiple ways to do it: antioxidants, blood circulatory things, B vitamins, especially B12. There are a lot of ways you can assist a particular function that the liver is having difficulties with in an individual.
Well, I think for me, when I think of liver, uh, it's kind of really tied a bit to cholesterol and triglycerides, because is that not the function of the liver, is to produce, and it may does am I correct, or does it overproduce cholesterol in some ways if it's not operating function or optimally?
Well, the liver normal function is, yes, to help us with cholesterol, because we need cholesterol assigned to, it helps us move cholesterol, is more how I would approach it. It will bind or break down or move it to places where it needs, because we need cholesterol for our hormone production. We need cholesterol for our skin and hair and joints. We need cholesterol to it's an oil, it's a fat, so we need it for energy. We need to store it in a closet somewhere so that we have access to it in case we don't have carbohydrate or sugars for our metabolism or for our energy, so we can burn fat for that. And the problem is when a function either can't do that or when it overdoes. So cholesterol, if we're getting too much carbohydrate and we turn it into fat and we don't have a place to store it, you'll get a fatty liver. That's why there's the non-alcoholic fatty livers really becoming the trend lately, because we eat too many carbohydrates, and that can be mostly grains, but it can be sugars, straight up sugar from our snacky things that so many Americans at least like. And
Well, and carbohydrates, I mean, I look at them, uh, and I've broken this down into what hits the reward center of the brain, and things that are sugary, creamy, which a carb essentially turns into a creamy, fatty deliciousness, right? Um, and a little bit of salt, and you've got what the
Well,
brain
snack
loves.
companies have studied that extensively. In
Of
fact, some of
course,
our
they
research
have.
is because they
You
want to
can't
sell
eat just
us.
one Lay's potato chip, for
Right.
heaven's sake.
Well, the
Um,
satiety or the feeling like a meal is finished is usually accomplished with something fatty. So a lot of times, even if we're not truly hungry, we need something like that to make it feel finished to us. Habitually, we choose sweet because it tastes good. And but you have to keep in mind, if we're not using this fuel, if we can't assign it to skin, hair, nails, joints, if we don't have a place for it, we're going to store it as fat. And so when we do that, it means we're not using it up, or we can't get to it. Sometimes it's a efficiency issue.
sure. And is there an easy way to open that door to the storage?
Uh, there's a number of different ways. So it depends, again, constitution, genetics, how you're wired, kind of thing. So sometimes the issue is just making sure the gallbladder function is good. So the gallbladder sits, so the liver kind of looks like that. And then the gallbladder kind of tucks in, and that's under the right ribs. and on everybody. And then on the opposite side is the pancreas, and they even have a little tiny duct, a little pathway to talk to each other with that. So digestive problem in one will affect a digestive problem in the other. So aiding the function of the gallbladder, sometimes with pancreatic enzymes, sometimes with bile salts, sometimes castor packs, which is castor oil, which comes from the castor bean, and you apply it topically right over that rib area, over the liver and the gallbladder, and it penetrates and is anti-inflammatory. So reducing inflammation, turmeric, for example, would help the function of the bile or the gallbladder. And so the gallbladder is like an on-demand hot water heater. So it it stores just a tiny bit, just enough to get you started, while the rest of the machinery kicks in when you push the button. And so when you eat something that needs to be digested, specifically a fatty, creamy deliciousness, then you get this button push that says, okay, we need to emulsify, or like what soap does to oil in water is to separate it into tiny droplets, is it breaks down that fat for you, the bile salts do, that we naturally produce, and it breaks it down, and it helps you break that fat into even smaller particles. So then you can assign them where you need them, like the cell membranes for brain function. Our brain is almost all fat. So, but what fat you put in there determines the quality.
Right.
So
Right.
that's where you have to choose between saturated or more vegetarian types of fats.
Certainly. So, in my estimation, it's like, well, if I, knowing what we just learned, and that is we feel fuller when we have a fat, then putting olive oil, avocado, coconut oil, something in with the food that we're eating anyway, would be a way for us potentially to feel fuller rather than having the dessert, which is calorie laden, and tastes good, or eating that donut. I guess is I look at a donut as being,
Well, sugar's never going to give us that satisfied, finished feeling. It'll taste good for a minute, or but we're more inclined to ask for more and more bites, unless you have good, personal self control and assess, am I truly hungry? Stop here, kind of thing. Fat gives a little bit more of the satiety, more the I'm finished. I not necessarily a full feeling, but like I'm done. And so fat can give that, and adding it to a meal can be helpful. I wouldn't recommend a lot of fat in a meal if you already have indigestion, burping, heartburn after a meal or with meals. I wouldn't necessarily do that. That's already a sign that you're low in bile salts or pancreatic enzymes, because they help each other. So I would consider a less fat, but when you have fat, to have the good quality. And the kinds that you listed are like a vegetarian style. Animal fat is saturated. So if it hardens at room temperature, that's what it has a potential to do in your body, in your cell membranes, everywhere else, is just harden, which makes the signaling and the messages and all the other molecules that have to go through those membranes inefficient. You either don't get things in or you don't get things out, so you can build toxicities, etc. Um, the the cholesterol that is most dangerous for us is the saturated, but cholesterol presence doesn't necessarily mean disease. Although when it's in high amounts, then you look at, either is it a genetic thing? Is the liver efficient at metabolizing it? Like, is it just backlogged? Or is there an underlying condition that says I need some repair? Because new research is showing that cholesterol, when it shows up high, sometimes is a sign, and possibly always, there's not enough studies yet, but possibly always when it shows up, it is actually trying to protect us from breakdown of the vascular system. So it's going in like little band-aids trying to cover leaks. And The more leaks you have, or the more the integrity of the vascular system is starting to crack and age, kind of like an old radiator hose, I guess is the best analogy, where it's cracking and it's not efficient and
Right.
gets leaks kind of thing. And it can degrade as far as the integrity of that tissue, the elasticity. You lose that flexibility when the blood pressure has to shift when you're being more active. So it's been found that the cholesterol goes in and protects that and kind of heals those leaks. The problem is eventually you get so thick a thing going on there as far as the cholesterol protecting the inner lining, that you can create a blockage. And then eventually, like any clogged pipe, there might be something that blows through and then you've got a clot. And so we've got to be very careful with too much cholesterol. And that's why it's been so important in cardiovascular health, so that we
Sure.
don't throw clots or clumps of cholesterol or slow down the circulation, that we have nice open pipes, so to speak. But the cholesterol in itself isn't necessarily the disease. It's more like a symptom of the disease.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so as far as there may be some folks that don't have a gallbladder that is able to release the bile. So you know, and I'm not. I can only share the experiences that I've heard about or that I've had personally. And really, the medical doctors are not so much, if a gallbladder's been removed, they really have no advice. They just say, you have no restriction. You just don't have this problem anymore. You don't have any. So that they don't really have any, maybe training, I don't know, in the how to manage diet, now that you no longer have that organ.
Well, the answer to that is yes, in a way that nothing is dramatically changed, because the liver still produces bile. However, it no longer has that availability for the first few bites or the first part of the meal, because it has to produce it in response rather than start to use what it had in reserve. So, so your ability to break down food or have food fully metabolized so that you can get all the nutrients from it is compromised now. You can still have digestive troubles, diarrhea, nausea, um, still have abdominal pain, all those kind of problems in response to fat in the diet, because now you're not breaking it down at all. And that can be a problem with it. So some people can just go back to eating the normal diet and they feel fine. Other people, they still have symptoms. They'll even have as symptoms as if the gallbladder had been present before they got it removed. It'll still feel that uncomfortable. And that's the liver trying to produce at that time. So your digestion and assimilation of nutrients, your actual getting nutrient quality from your food, will be compromised. It's just not noticeable at first. And the other part of it with the gallbladder is that if it's been compromised for a long time that leads to a surgical removal, then it was pretty inefficient anyway. And you don't necessarily, I mean, you want to keep it if you can get it back up to function. But there's after a while, it just gets so full of stones, which in Chinese medicine is stagnation, and very, very painful if those stones tumble around and block the duct, and can be an emergency situation. Sometimes people will have symptoms, every symptom of gallbladder attack, which is a lot of pain, usually in the evening or after a late meal or after a fatty meal, often wakes them up. It radiates usually to the right shoulder a lot of times. And they will have that problem for a long, 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 long time. And that kind of problem, it's gonna create episode of acute, and after a while it's just not worth it. And so I'm not saying you shouldn't remove it in an emergency situation at all. I really think you should, but there are times in herbs that you can do to make it more efficient. Sometimes you just get past it and it's better than it ever was.
Sure.
But excuse me, a
And
gallbladder attack is not the
I've
time
seen
to go through a
cases of
cleanse.
I have seen cases of both where somebody has maybe not necessarily stones, but they have all the symptoms of um, a, a gallbladder that is not working efficiently, and they have been able to manage with uh, some digestive enzymes, and they're doing well as long as they don't overdo the fats and they've kept their organ. And I've had other folks that are flat on their back on the floor, um, extremely uncomfortable. Gallbladder hasn't been working for years, and they're fairly young. They just have a
Mhm.
predisposition, perhaps with their genetics, that they're they just don't metabolize fat very well at all, and they've had their organ removed.
Yeah.
Um,
It can happen younger and younger because we've got younger people eating unhealthier diets than they used to get in past generations. A lot more snack foods, food 24/7, more sedentary, a lot less exercise. So they are having some genetics definitely contributes to that,
sure,
but yeah, we are getting younger people with problems. The kind that where you have symptoms but you can mitigate them, a lot of times in ultrasound you can't even find that kind of a gallbladder problem. It usually shows negative. And I've even seen people with much more severe disease where it's just not showing in the ultrasound, and the surgeon made the decision that, yeah, I do think this is really symptomatic, and they go in and they remove it and they find out, yes, it is pretty damaged, but it just didn't show on the ultrasound. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that.
well, and I know that there's an expensive test to do, and forgive me, I don't remember what the acronym stands for. HIDA, it's either HIDA or HEDA. So um, it's where they inject nuclear medicine studies. So they're putting
Mhm.
dye into your system, and then they're uh, watching. It's over a period of an hour. They watch to see how much bile is released by the gallbladder, and they do it by CT scan. So they're watching to see if how much it is ejecting or refracting, as they call it.
Mhm.
And it's really that is their, especially in a young person where you would not necessarily expect
Mhm.
a gallbladder. They, they have, unfortunately have to prove to the insurance company why why the surgery is necessary, and
Mhm.
so this expensive test is done. And very often they will find that the ejection refraction is less than 10%, and so that's now they have their data.
Unfortunately, they don't do that test very often.
No, you
um,
really do have to push for it, but
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
dictated by insurance. But I would say that if you can get that test and the doctor thinks, or your major practitioners think that that's what's going on, then it's worth testing for sure.
sure.
But there's lots of things you can do with that. And like I said, milk thistle, turmeric. You can. There's some other less known herbs like Boldo, chelidonium. Those help specifically with fat, with metabolism that associate with the gallbladder. Then you have other herbs that are more assistive, like dandelion root can do that still. It's more of a kidney herb, but it can also help on the liver side. And the the nutrient, like I said, B12, B6 could be really useful because the liver is responsible for many pathways. And so when you give it the right nutrients, it might be able to complete a pathway. Glutathione is a really, really important part in the detoxification. And that's a lot of people do cleanses and will try and detoxify heavy metals, pesticides, chemicals, all the stuff that comes into our bodies every day with our food, with our air, water. And so our liver is constantly, whether we're aware of it or not, constantly detoxing us. And so you can assist that path sometimes by either doing a faster cleanse, which rests the digestive aspects so that you can focus more on some of the other qualities that the liver has to function with. And you can really add some things like parsley and beets to artichoke. Those things actually will assist the liver even further when you're in, not just exclusively, but when you're in a fasting state. And you can eat those on a regular basis just dietarily to give your liver an assist, love your liver, so to speak. Greens help, spinach helps. these are foods that we could incorporate often into our diet, and whether it's a frozen spinach or it's a fresh kind of thing that's coming from your garden, because it's coming out in the gardens right now. So this is a really good time to be doing that. Artichoke, if anybody's ever seen it, is probably the most gorgeous flower I've ever seen. And it's luminescent purple, and it's tall. It's just gorgeous. And it's just this simple flower, but you have to harvest it if you want an artichoke before it flowers. So I'm always torn whenever I plant it in my garden. I'm always torn. Do I want the flower? Do I want the artichoke?
You might have to plant a couple so you can keep
Yeah, and
the
you do.
flower.
You got to plant at least several of these because they're so gorgeous. You have to have the flowers. But, and speaking of flowers and plants, that leads me to some of the emotional qualities. In Chinese medicine, the different organs have um, different emotions associated. So, for example, the lungs will have grief, the kidneys will have fear, and the liver has anger. And so when we just, kind of archaic terms that we would use would be like bilious. That person is kind of bilious, or they have a bilious complexion, which means usually they're kind of yellowish or green. As far as looking ill, but it can also be red because they're angry. And so it used to be the terms would kind of tell you what organ was going on with someone, and we can tell sometimes in the face, as far as the complexion and the colors of things, what organ system is associated. And there's kind of a green tinge with liver, and bile, interestingly, is green. And if you see that in your stool, if you have a green stool, that's something to pay attention to. And but the balance of the emotion anger, righteous or not, is that is creativity. And the green, which is very appropriate, is actually a healing color for the liver. It balances the red. I think there's something about light and color as well that's green and red. There's some reverse balance in there anyway, just from an artist perspective. But the morning glory vine, if you want to aid your liver, you imagine it. Morning glory is it's a vine. It wraps around things. So you imagine it wrapping around your liver gently, not strangling, and you imagine the beautiful flowers with that, and giving you creativity and balance and health and healing on your liver. The liver, if you find yourself getting chronically irritable or easily irritated by things, that's a sign to pay attention. Maybe my liver needs some clearing. Could be you're getting lack of sleep and that kind of thing, but you can also have your sleep affected because the liver's not working well. Liver should be dormant at night as an organ. And a lot of people that wake up around 3 o'clock, it's often a liver symptom. It means the liver is actively doing something when it should be sleeping. And so if it has to do that, then it's not a happy liver. So visualizations of green and morning glory and creative activities. And if you've got anger, build something. So think of pottery, smashing pottery. Okay, I got the anger out. Now I'm going to make a mosaic. And then you've created something beautiful out of that. I must break up something and change it. That's what anger is for. Anger is our rocket fuel. Anger is to allow us to change things. And a lot of people are afraid of anger, or they suppress it, or they get chronically frustrated. Sometimes it's not appropriate. Sometimes you can't show it. Sometimes a lot of us are afraid of it because we don't want to harm someone. But the reality is, if you keep stuffing it down, it's going to blow like a volcano at some point. And so then there is harm usually at that point when it explodes. But if that's something, if you can consciously recognize that you're feeling angry or irritable, even if you're overly sensitive, the things that you're irritable about are probably truly things to pay attention to. The intensity is what you should fix. And so, it's like, okay, I'm irritable all the time. Irritable is kind of like a lesser anger type of thing, or it's just like you're just, like a cat rubbed the wrong way kind of thing. So So irritability can occur because you have a migraine, because you didn't sleep well, because your hormones are out of balance, but all those are still regulated by the liver. And so treating the liver, maybe a castor oil pack, maybe taking turmeric, maybe making sure that you have plenty of enzymes when you digest things, or not eating very late so your liver doesn't have to function at all when you're sleeping. Those would be ways to help assist reduce that.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about the emotion of liver. When I and this is a kind of a flashback, if you will, to the book and then the movie, Eat, Pray, Love. And I think it's in the movie during the palm reading that the character has where she's meeting with this, I want to say his name is Kirkut. He's this old Tibetan, he does like a medicine man, and he's doing the palm reading, and he looks and he says, you need to smile on your liver. You have anger. And she truly did, because she was, if I'm recalling correctly, she was angry because a friend of hers had died from like liver cancer or something like that. So they kind of tied it all together, at least in the movie. Now we're talking probably 10 years ago, this movie was out. Um, so that's kind of what I remember about the liver is you really have to treat it well, because if you don't treat it well, it's not going to take care of you.
Your liver will do everything it can until it stops. And so if you want balance in your body, you have to include the liver. You have to. It's not an option. It's interesting because it's in the middle of your body. It's not in the lower organs. It's not in the upper organs. It's between. And so it's part of your balance, the center of you. And
It really
works
almost
in
is in that
teamwork with
solar
everything.
plexus.
Yeah. Yeah. It works with everything that is important to us for our journey forward. So if you think about, okay, where our lower organs are rooting to humanity, rooting to the earth, our middle organs are related to how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive our community. It's our center of everything. And then in order to move into the heart, you have to be healthy or clear in the middle. Otherwise, you're stuck there. And so, anger is a way to get past that, as is sadness or um, working on depression, those kind of emotions. It's like recognize that you have them. It's not necessarily always that you have to fix it. It's that you have to recognize it for what it is or what triggered you and work on that. And then you can move into the heart space, or moving into the heart, love, compassion, forgiveness. Forgiveness is big because that's where you can then open yourself all the way as far as not reacting to things, but responding by conscious choice to things. Like a lot of people live their life where everything is responding to something that came to them or happened to them or happened in their life. They feel like they have no control. And if they're always reacting, they never have a chance to actually consciously create or drive their own path. And so that's where we want to go. We want to go to the place where we can choose. And anger and the liver function as an organ help us move into that conscious control rather than I'm always reacting and out of control.
And the herbs that you're, and I'll get a list and then put them in the notes for later, so that because I don't always spell correctly, and then I go looking for things and I can't find what I'm looking for. So we'll try to come up with a list and post it in the notes after the video. Um, you may not necessarily feel an immediate, this is not like taking a medication, a synthetic medication, where there's an immediate, you take the pill and within 20 minutes you feel miraculously different. This is something over time, would you say? Although maybe
Usually over
digestive
time, it
enzyme
takes
would be.
Yeah, it takes time to build. So build the problem. So it'll take time usually to unravel them. But you can get immediate effect, especially in the digestive aspects with bile salts, with pancreatic enzymes, anything that assists the digestion as you're moving through that very spot can be helpful. Fiber can be really helpful, pulling cholesterol out that's excess, and also helping the stool linger in your system longer. If you have a tendency to loose stools or diarrhea, you can actually slow that down so you'll absorb the nutrients better. But that in turn helps the liver function. So because things are slowing down and not as irritated, you don't have this inflammation feedback going back. So it will assist. So most treatments that I would use, I would have them on months for that, but I do expect some sort of symptom relief in just a couple weeks, depending on the condition, but usually in a couple weeks I
Sure.
expect. The only thing that wouldn't necessarily fit that is perhaps detox. Sometimes when you detox, you can feel immediately better, and that's usually a sign that you don't have a lot going on there. It's just a moment that you got overwhelmed. But more often than not, when you're trying to detox, there's this fine line between pushing it so that you can get things moved out and not overdoing it so that you feel completely awful and feel much, much worse than you did before you did the detox. In
Sure.
fact, a lot of people will do a detox program, which you can get over the counter in pre-made packages and supplements and bottles. Uh, they're usually a blend of herbs, often that will work on some of the digestive aspects to support the things that happen around the liver function. But a lot of times you will feel so much worse, and a lot of people will start a detox and they'll feel terrible and they'll stop. And that's terrible for you because then you reabsorb all that garbage instead of taking it all the way out. And
So you need a gentler form of
yeah, so they might
detox
need a
then.
gentler form. It doesn't mean they have to stop. They might take less. And I've had some people where we're talking drops of something where you can't hardly do much of a push. And so sometimes those people, I'll do something like blue-green algae. I'll have them do small doses, very tiny doses, and build up over time. And that way they're getting both a nutritional aspect and some of the detox. Normally, a blue-green algae, spirulina, chlorella kind of product can be nutritional, but the higher the dose you take, you can actually go into a detox from it. Some people that need very gentle cleansing, I will have them do a very low dose of the blue green algae, see how they respond to that first, and then hopefully build them up with the blue green algae and then get to a dose that can be detoxifying. The other option, especially if I have someone who's older or whose constitution is more frail, then I will have them do like a detox tea. So a tea is going to be gentler, and you can also really regulate the dose quite a bit by sipping it, by wafting the tea bag in the water and then taking it out so it doesn't sit in and do lots of steeping. Sometimes I'll use that to go stronger and let it steep for an hour and then drink it. And the nice thing about tea is it can be hot or cold, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Well,
pleasant tasting.
I am, you know, always learning, and I've had lots of time to look at studies and research as we all have. And it is fascinating to me, sort of, that there have been teas and herbs and things that have been used in other countries as a primary source of boosting immune, or taking care of, uh, as a a medicinal plant in a tea to move things through rather than um, sit, wait, find a medication that works. And that tends to be more the American way. And so I'm very encouraged by the fact that we have now so much more access to the teas and information we can research that uh, I'm amazed at all the properties. But then again, I'm looking at some of the medications we have and understanding, for instance, the heart medication Ingerol comes from a plant that grows in the mountains. So I think that we can educate ourselves as to how our body works and what will work for us. And if a tea works, I think that's um, a very simplistic way, but yet very effective way.
Well, keep in mind that here in America, we have access to. I mean, we're pharmaceutical driven. We're corporate interest, so we have a lot of pharmaceuticals. Now, the pharmaceuticals kind of got started from products in nature. Even the famous antibiotic came from mold, and so following what happens in nature, what the people used, the native people used for illness, disease, injury, they did research. So then that's when science came in and studied the plants and the properties and the constituents, and then they made medications out of them. Foxglove, for example, is, it's a beautiful plant, and we have it in our gardens, and it can be toxic if you were to ingest it, because it affects the heart, and there's medicinal properties in small quantities that you can take to regulate the heart. And that's where they started to get the medications for some of the heart, and patent it, because you can own it once it's in a pharmaceutical form.
Right.
So, but many areas in the world still depend on native plants. And we are lucky in our global international world right now, where we have access to herbs from other countries. So instead of saying just in America, just here in our particular region, we can have access to these particular herbs, we can also get those from India, from China, from Madagascar. It's not just importing vanilla spice or something, although spices themselves have medicinal properties.
Sure.
So we have a lot of that global international quality to it, but really we should look local. We really should look local. So for example, horsetail, which is gardener's bane, when it shows up, is actually telling us a couple things. One, it's Mother Nature trying to heal a deficiency in the soil. So this is something that's really come back to me, as what we call weeds is actually Mother Nature trying to correct an imbalance. Something doesn't grow well here, so I'm going to put something else. And often what we call weeds are medicinal. They're just undesired because they don't grow pretty, or they take over, they can be invasive, but they add something to that region, to that soil. And a lot of the native people learn to utilize something. And one thing that got taught to me as a gardener was that if something is growing in your yard, maybe you need it. So look it up. Look up the medicinal properties. Look up and see what it'll do. So if you get lots of dandelions, maybe you need to treat your liver or kidney. If you get horsetail, maybe you have a vascular problem, because it's really good for varicose veins.
I
Or
keep
you need
wondering.
minerals high in
I
silica.
keep I keep wondering how I can pull the horsetails that are growing in like the empty lot next to us. How how do I like? There is a lot there. I should be able to harvest.
And
you
you can.
know.
I do that, especially if you go in early in the spring. It's pretty easy. You can just Google how to harvest them, but I will get the spring tips and I'll make a tea. And I thought, this is going to taste horrible, right? It was actually very pleasant, very mild. It was a very pleasant tea. And so it was one that maybe if you want more punch, more flavor or something to it, I would add maybe mint or something. But it was a very gentle flavored tea, and I was so impressed. And so what I was doing was I was harvesting as I was weeding. So that's what I do for a lot of it, is to find out which part of the plant and when. That's the important part.
Yeah.
When
Is
to
it
get
the
the best
root or
properties.
is it the which part? Yeah.
Right. I do the same thing with raspberry leaf. Raspberry leaf is great for blood and cramps and women's type of pelvic issues. And so when I'm ready to cut back my raspberry branches and bushes in the spring before they start flowering and everything, or in the fall, I will harvest the leaves. and I will sometimes dehydrate them for later to save and store for later, or I will use them fresh right then and make a tea out of it. So you can do other things. You can make tinctures and other kind of stuff, but that depends on how interested in you are to do that. But chickweed is great for the lymph. So you're talking about the immune system for the liver. That is the lymphatic process or function that the liver has. And the lymph system is, in a sense, the freeway of your immune system. And the lymph nodes are like the bus stops or traffic stops. And so if you have lymph swelling, you have a backup of traffic. And so it's important. It's not that the lymph itself, lymph node is a problem. It's a sign that the lymph is stagnant. It's not flowing, and that means your immune system is not being effective. And that makes sense when you think of conditions like lymphoma. It's lymph nodes that are the most damaged, and so working on keeping your lymph clean and clear, which is in Chinese medicine related to the liver gallbladder. So the bile keeps the lymph clear is one way we look at it in Chinese medicine. So lymph is very little studied when I was going through medical school. Very little was known about lymph back then, and we are really discovering that there's amazing need and has far more effect in the whole body. And gosh, I went to do a lecture on Alzheimer's just a few years back, and they had literally like just published papers just before I went to do the lecture, changed everything about my lecture because they had discovered that there is lymph circulation in the brain, which they had never thought could occur. But it was always like, how did something get across the blood-brain barrier? Well, it's getting
Right.
through via the lymph circulation. And then that makes sense when you think inflammation, brain injuries, degradation in the brain where you couldn't find another reason for it. The plaque formations, it's not just, and you knew it wasn't just circulatory, it was getting to other places, and it was the lymph. So
It's pretty amazing, all of the things that we're now learning across the blood-brain barrier into the brain, where we didn't think, we really thought there was this membrane that kept our brain safe. I don't know why
yeah.
we thought that, but it's been far more studied. I still think we think the brain is this unstudied. Um, we just don't have enough information about the brain, and I think the opposite is true. I think we don't have enough information about the gut. There is just, we understand kind of, but not really, and it's so, we are put together in the most amazing, always looking to make a correction and reach that homeostasis, that perfect level. The body is very efficient if we would stop insulting it.
True, true. It's very resilient, very reparative. We would probably be living quite a bit longer. I mean, we're living longer now because we've got better nutrition across the board versus, just regional or just a few that made it up, had success, got a great region growing kind of thing. And it was more than just resources. Now we can spread it around a little bit, and we're constantly learning. First we made cereal, and then we had to fortify it because we didn't realize that the process of making cereal was taking nutrients out. And so we've learned, so our understanding of the human body goes like this, as far as us learning kind of on the go, and we do something terrible for ourselves. And, margarine, for example, it's like, well, we want something that's less fat, but then we created all these chemical form. And so then we find out, oh, that's much worse for you and much worse for your brain and your cardiovascular than it was when we were doing just plain butter. And so there's always something. Now the trend is the gut biome and all the things going on with that. And I have to agree that if it's an end gate, it's the end and the beginning at the same time, because our flora sends back all kinds of good nutrients and goodies and signals and balances a lot of things. So you do have to start there and end there. But I would put the liver just as important. We're always finding it, the new important, the new important system. It's the
well,
heart, it's the brain, it's the, yeah,
well, and I do think you could drive yourself a little nutty, trying to keep track of all of it and trying to do the right thing based on what you've been told, depending on
correct.
the
Yeah.
who you follow. And I have learned I need to follow for myself and my body because I am truly trying to be the expert of my own body and maybe help my kids or those that have some genetic likeness to me and say, okay, let's see how your body responds. Here's the deck of cards you were given to play in this lifetime. How will you learn how to manage you?
Well, and that's why we have different protocols, especially when it comes to diet types, because they're trying to incorporate some of that genetic difference with that. We all want to be healthy. We want to be balanced. We all want to support certain things and make sure we get certain nutrients. Uh, but but how we can utilize that or how we can approach it, how we can add it in, is what varies so much person to person. And that's exactly what happens is somebody has great success doing one thing and then they create a book on it, and that's all they research and they tell everybody else, and that will work for a percentage of people that are very much like them genetically,
Mm-hmm.
and other people won't work, so then someone else finds something else. And
Well,
so
it
we are
is.
getting
It's
that
kind of
in
like
little
it's
spin-offs.
like the blood type. Eat right for your blood type, which
Mhm.
by and large works pretty well. But you have little caveats. You have little things that you've inherited that may not fit that exactly. And so it's a book or a guide. It's a guideline and it's written um, broadly, but it's up to the individual. And in my opinion, um, I'll go out on a limb and say healthcare reform. Don't look for healthcare reform to be some entity. Healthcare reform is you. You need to reform your own health and take care of yourself and learn about yourself and what works and doesn't work. And then you can reform your health. Maybe not need so much tests and medications and you know.
Well, where our medical system is trying to go, in part, again, that's driven by pharmaceutical insurance for the most part, is they want a cookbook. They want a book that says, oh, you have this, then open the book, do this, flowchart style. And so they want that. And that will help generally. That will get some people in the door. And I'm talking not, acute broken arm kind of
Right.
surgical
Yeah.
decision. I'm talking about chronic health kind of things, or chronic wellness. And so that will work for some people. A cookbook will get some people started, but it's not going to be individualized at all. And they are trying to take that out because there's too many subheadings, too many uh, small choices to make, and the simpler that they can do it, more broad they can paint it, that they would prefer that. But that's not going to work for a lot of people. And so you are quite correct. If we can avoid doing any kind of intervention until we are acute or need a surgery or have an injury that need to be treated, because I think our medicine is fantastic with that. If you can take care of yourself until then, if you can prevent, ideally, because if you can prevent and take care of yourself while your organs are good, aren't as toxic, are more efficient, then your aging will be better. Your chronic, even your genetic obstacles will be less intense. I have a lot of people with all kinds of genetic things that we have found, you and I together, even
Yeah.
certain things. And yet people have either naturally or over time learned how to mitigate it. Yeah, the genetics didn't change, but their effect on them changed because of the choices they made. And that is related to the food you choose, the chemicals you allow into your system or surround you, and every choice you make, whether it's exercise, don't exercise, go to bed early, sit on the computer all night, all those choices will make a difference on what you're going to need and the health of your organs, including and specifically the liver these days. Um, so many chemicals out there and everything that we just really we have to be conscious consumers. We have to be conscious in our habits, including just even what we choose to do for work.
Right.
We have to choose what is acceptable, what I can keep up with, what I can overcome, and not have it wear me down. And that includes stress. You know, if stress is killing you, if stress is causing you to get constant migraines or go to the doctor, or constant massages, constant medications that are in turn themselves having toxicity to you, side effects, then you have to think about, is this worth my life? Maybe I could make less money but not have the stress, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, and we get ourselves into circles. You know, you get the car, the house, the family, and now you have responsibilities and you have to keep up with certain things, and you have to
Yeah.
decide what is important, which part of your health matters.
And I think for many people, this time that we've had these past few months has really kind of pared it down for us as
It
far as
has.
what is important. And
Yeah.
really, I think a lot of folks have learned that it's the relationships with family members and friends that is important, and it's not necessarily going out on the expensive boat or having, we can
Yeah,
all, we have to we have to have food, we have to have water, and we have to have shelter.
correct.
Those are the most basic things.
Well, and
And
those should
friendships.
be our inalienable rights. They should be basic for every human on the planet. They
Yeah.
should. And
Yeah.
an animal, you know, it's whatever, you know, their thing is they should have that. And if they want to live outdoors, fine. And if they want a tent, or if they want a house or a roof, that's fine too. But we should have access to all of those things. And uh, you know, that's another deep well to go down to. But you're right, the
Certainly.
community, how we can help each other.
Hmm.
And some people have better or easier or more resources than someone else. And I am seeing a lot of sharing. I am seeing a lot of sharing along, helping other people, especially, and I'm seeing it pared down to neighborhoods, partly because that's proximity, you know, just who you're
Sure.
surrounded by. We're keeping in touch, you know, long distance with videos and phone and such. But um, a lot of people who are feeling lonely, they are trying to create ways of communicating in their neighborhood with their families in different creative ways. Like recently there's like this chalk event, people are donating, people are really getting into it, sharing recipes on how to make your own if you don't have chalk. And it just like it's becoming a thing. And it just came really because somebody was missing just seeing kids outside playing and wanted art and beauty. And everybody can take a walk, so go for a walk and look at
there
something. Yeah.
there have been some of those wonderful things around. It started out in different countries where the Italians were going out and singing from their balconies,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I joined a group that was called the World of Hearts, and people were decorating their windows. Their kids obviously looking for things to do with their children, but decorating different scenes with hearts,
Mm-hmm.
so that we had something pretty to look at as we walked by. And other people were putting teddy bears, like uh, where's Waldo kind of thing. Go look for the teddy bear. Where is theirs? And I found myself really wanting to be a part of that. And so I purchased liquid chalk that's meant to write on glass. And we did, I went down and drew hearts on the school bus shelter because it's all enclosed in glass. And then cleaned all the markers and set them out, and then let all the kids on our block know that the markers were there and they could do the same. And so we've got this beautifully decorated by all the kids in our neighborhood, and now they've used it, the markers, to decorate the cars because they're doing graduation ceremonies or birthday
Mm, yep.
drive-bys, and so we've become adaptive, and we as humans are very adaptive. And I think that brings us back to the liver as being, I mean, we're very adaptive.
Well, and this is a really good example when you're talking about doing creative things. So we could be in anger, we could be just stewing, sitting here in our homes, but a way to balance that is to do creative things. And so we feel a lot more peace and harmony in our bodies. We are adaptable, very flexible, not just as an emotional conscious being, but also in our physical being, in our organ systems. So we have a fluidity, we have the ability to change our outcome, which I think is a core humanity thing. You know, I think that's something that makes us the word human, that we have this adaptability and creativity within us that is more than just problem solving. It's actually creating something from nothing that, you know, I mean, just look at the time that we've had right now. I prefer this kind of world in some respects. I prefer the kind of world where we take time and we're not just doing it for ourselves. That might start the process for ourselves, but we're doing it for others too as a consequence. Those kind of things, that's the world that I want. That's the world that I think we can continue and foster. That is part of that liver energy, frankly.
Yeah.
We right now we have all these things going on in some of these cities, but that's one part of the liver. And another way to express it is some of these community and heartfelt and sharing and assisting. That's another way to do it as well. Maybe as a whole, we need all of those things, but I don't see, if we just destroy, we need to create, we need to build.
Well, and I think that, as you're saying, I've seen communities that are doing murals, that are taking their um, frustration, and they're creating art and bringing awareness in the art by creating a mural, and bringing in, if you will, the taggers and some of those folks, let me tell you, that do this art on the side of train cars. Not that I promote this.
Oh, the
They are
graffiti,
artists.
some
The
of them are
graffiti
phenomenal
artists
art.
are amazing.
Yeah,
To bring them
yeah.
in and help create the outline, they just see the world,
Mhm.
uh, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, I'm
Actually,
seeing that with musicians, poets. You know, I'm seeing all kinds of things where people are
yes.
sharing their human condition,
Hmm.
and some are, you know, doing fun with it, and some people are quite serious, and
Yeah,
yeah, and sharing it on, and some things will resonate with an individual, and some things won't, and
yeah.
um, you know, that's why we listen to sad music when we're sad, and
Hmm.
you know, really punch music when we're upset, and
Maybe
we
somebody
sometimes
should
need
start.
to be in that. Yeah.
Maybe you're right. And I'm going, oh, well, maybe we just need to start playing more classical music and disperse crowds with it. I don't know.
It's better than microwaves.
Right?
Yes.
Oh, goodness.
Well, you know,
Well,
that's why they use color too, because they know it
yes.
affects. You know, if you put a certain color in a hospital or institution, it creates a certain personality and feel in there. Absolutely. If you want people to be happy and cheerful and take the edge off, you change the color, usually in like citrusy or sunny tones. Heart, heart, you know, pinks, but you don't do red. You don't do
No,
red.
no.
Yeah, red,
Well,
red is the side of the liver.
I
Green
have
is the
seen, I
balance side.
have seen it used kind of in a joking way, but I know of one high school that made wherever the opposing team used that locker room.
Hmm.
That locker room was more pink or mauve, so it was, not a fight color, but it was
Right.
this,
It would
right. And I'm
take kind of
going,
their energy
huh?
down.
Yeah, right. I'm going,
There's
oh,
somebody using some
right,
psychology.
right,
Yeah.
and
Unconscious psychology.
unconsciously. So,
So
and
that makes me, you know, another thing that we have to watch is what we consume, not just dietarily, but in news. if we're consuming things that are always angry, upset, bad, terrible, the news, okay, then you're going to start feeling anxious and upset and unhappy inside. And I'm not saying don't be informed. What I'm saying is regulate your dose, because what you are consuming is affecting you and becoming you. And
Steep in it, don't stew in it.
right, don't steep and stew, exactly. So you don't want to become those things. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be, we have an internal network right here and right here. We have an internal conscious knowing. This is our internet. This is our uh this is our telephone to people. We know these things if we're given time and quiet. And when we consume things that are constantly distracting us, we never get to hear that. We talk about doing things that are healthy for ourselves or making healthy habits or choices. Well, you have to listen to your body. You have to listen to that feels good, that doesn't feel good. And if you're just shoving it down and watching, for example, it's a really good example, is we'll be eating in front of the TV. We will consume an entire bag of popcorn where we might have had a cup if we'd thought about what we were hungry for.
Right.
And so that's what we have to pay attention to, is our body is constantly giving our signals. Our body is like a little lab puppy that just wants to do anything it can for you. Anything, please, can I help you? Right? And
It's up to us to
so
listen.
sometimes we kick it, and sometimes we're like, oh yeah, you're right, you do need to go outside and go potty. And so we have to listen to what our body is telling us, and watch what we consume on every level, and be creative. If you feel something, don't be afraid of it, but balance it.
Sure.
And creativity is a great place to start with it.
Well, one of the things I appreciate about coming in to see you in particular, but probably other naturopaths, is it's not a 7-minute appointment.
No, it's not a seven
Um,
minutes. I'm not looking at
no,
the clock. I don't have my back to you
no.
because
And
I'm
typically you're
computing.
not on your laptop typing in and telling me you're paying attention to me, but really you're typing in whatever data so that the visit can get covered by insurance. Um, so I have really found, not that medical allopathic physicians don't have their place in my care, because certainly I've had incidents where I've needed their interventions. But the fact that I can sit down and kind of sort through with you uh, symptoms, they are really clues as to what's going on in the body, and they are a bigger clue to you because you understand how the systems all work together on many levels, on the very basic anatomy level, but also in Chinese medicine and being an acupuncture, and so acupuncturist. So it really does make me a better informed human about how to take care of my own body, but in very simple ways, so that it doesn't maybe necessarily need this huge intervention. And that's what I really appreciate about you and your knowledge, and about naturopathic medicine and Chinese medicine, is that it's been around for thousands of years. And we're kind of, in my opinion, turning or leaning back into it now.
Well, in part of the situation we're going through right now, a lot of people are beginning to recognize that a lot of it lies in their own hands, because there is intervention on the testing side and the treatment when things get severe side, but there's nothing in between. You're on your own. And they told us at the beginning, don't overwhelm the ERs, save it for those who really need it. So
Right.
stay home, and then you're on your own. And so this is in a way teaching us that there's a place for things, and we are very much responsible. And I'm going to say, it's time for us to grow up. It's time for us to be responsible for our health. And it's never too late. It's never too late to grow up. We need to be conscious about the choices we make with what we're eating, we're doing with our physical body. And if you have genetics that you know about, then that gives you a guideline, a blueprint. If you don't, you can kind of look up the family chain and see what your patterns are and see what works for some and what doesn't work for others. And that will at least get you a good part of that self help. And then pay attention to your symptoms. They're sticky notes. They're just telling you what's out of balance. And if you listen to them soon enough, they don't have to give you 50 sticky notes, like I can tell when I'm getting behind in things. I have my, every wall surface covered in sticky notes because these are all the things I need to get to and I'm behind. And if I had caught this one or that one or did 3 to 5 a day kind of thing, I wouldn't have accumulated. And that's the same thing with health and disease is if you get to the 1 or 2 sticky notes ahead of time, then you don't have a flood of them occurring, where now you have deadlines kind of thing. And
Sure.
and I think that, and yeah, circumstances will bring other things up, but I think if we can pay attention to that, and we have so many resources right now. You have people like myself, people like you. We have the genetic testing if you wish to do it. We have the online, how to grow a garden, how to harvest something, how to grow an herb, what herbs are for. You have so many things, and that's something we still have to do too, is some of the garden stuff.
I know.
But
I,
we have Mother Nature has provided. We are human beings born on this planet Earth, born of this planet, made from these things, the minerals, the water, the air. We are made of that. So shouldn't we be able to thrive with what we are surrounded by? We should thrive by our food. We should thrive by what grows around us. We should have everything we need. We live here. Okay. The difference is we think sometimes that we can improve upon nature and create maybe something better, but then we always find there's a side effect to that. and
right.
and a lot of the herbs, when you're using whole herbs, is they have all the things that prevent the side effects, or there's a dose relationship with that. And one pill for all is never going to happen.
No, you
Never.
can't. You can't. You can't paint with a broad brush. You
Unless you
really.
genetically filter out every single person and come down to clones.
Yeah. No, thank
You
you.
have that, then maybe, yeah, maybe one medicine fits all. But we
Yeah.
even know if you keep replicating things, you actually have a decline in a cell line. You have a decline. You have to keep going back to that original in order to get a healthy line again.
Yeah.
So the same thing with us. Even if we replicate, there can be slightly different personalities, slightly different facial features, slight. At first they start out identical and then they start to.
Even identical twins don't always look identical for their entire life.
It's because of their emotions, because of what they consume, because of what they do, because of what their interests are. Yes, our whole body reflects. Our
Hmm.
whole body reflects what's going on in our experiences. Every
Well,
choice you made is what you wear right now. Every choice or not choice. Yeah. And
are you
sometimes it's a
wearing
good
jammy
thing.
pants every day? I'm
Elastic
not.
waistbands.
I am not. I quite honestly and literally put on jeans at least twice a week to remind my body you must fit into this uh, container, if you will, because I want to be responsible. I want to be that responsible human. I was given this body to get me through. My grandmother lived to be 99, so that's a long ways away.
That's good.
You know,
Yeah.
it's a good thing. I'd like to make it, and I'd like to be healthy, and I'd like to have my wits about me. Some days are better than others,
Mm.
and I think taking care of the liver. Uh,
Well, and one thing to mention on the liver, because yes, taking care of your liver, taking care of your body is being responsible. And I personally don't want a change in my circumstances to change me unless I choose the positive result. So there are some things I can't control, like illness going around, but I can control whether or not I have a healthy response to that. And I wanted to mention about the eyes because every organ in Chinese medicine opens to an orifice of some sort. So the liver affects the eyes. This is where it opens. And the eyes, a lot of times when we think about vitamin A, metabolized through the liver. When we think about antioxidants, they are necessary for the liver. When we think of macular degeneration, when we think of all the iPad and computer work and the damage to the eyes, we can overcome that if our liver is healthy. To some respects, there are some things we can't, like vitamin D, for another fat soluble vitamin. Again, strong effect through the liver and your immune system and your lymph. And vitamin D is really important. Our light, our sun contact, and what we can see visually, and what we can transform in our skin. So think of the liver as the connector to the rest of your human community, your physical community, all the other organs. And your eyes are also protected with the liver. And our eyes, we are a very visual being for the most part. We use our senses in general to interpret our world, but the eyes is more common than ears or taste for many people.
Well,
A higher percentage of the
we take
population.
in so much information through our eyes
Mhm.
that we actually are taking more information in than our brain can process.
Right. And then we have a lot of programs running unconsciously because of that.
Mhm.
So be conscious, be aware, put yourself on an information diet if you need to be in order to process and then get some more, and then process and then get some more. Uh, you are what you consume on every level,
And
every
in
level.
on and in so for acupuncture, the liver meridian doesn't really end anywhere around the eye. It
No,
it's over the
it
organ
is
itself, correct?
on the ribs, right over the liver
Yeah,
and the pancreas.
yeah, and
That's,
starts
yep.
at the big toe, if I'm remembering correctly.
Uh-huh. 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 Which
Um,
interestingly is often involved in gout, which is another rich diet disease kind of thing.
yeah,
Mhm.
affecting the kidneys and all of that. Yeah, fascinating. I think the human body is the most
It is so complex. The
miraculous,
more we
complex,
don't know. That's
unbelievable.
why I got into this,
Yeah,
because I figured we would never ever know everything
everything there
we
is to
needed
know.
to know about the body. I figured it was a never ending. It was either that or astronomy, solar system. You know, we'll never get all the answers, at least in my lifetime. So that's why I chose medicine,
Oh, great.
because I wanted something I could explore always.
Well, I am always learning. Every single day, I'm
Oh
learning
yeah,
more
me
and
too.
more.
Mm.
And I'm absolutely fascinated. And I tend to call myself a body detective because that's part of my mission is to figure it out. I love looking for the needle in the haystack. I love being able to figure things out. And it really does help to connect the dots when we add in Chinese medicine, and
Mm.
it's super helpful.
Well, they're a more ancient healing system. They have learned to look at the body without all the diagnostic tests and the blood work and all the things that we have nowadays with technology. So when you combine the information, we learn more and more about how those old ways of assessing the body, the tongue, the eye, the palm, the facial, they had to, they couldn't look inside all the time. So they
Right.
had to, and the people themselves, the patient had to look at how they felt more. And so the more technology we apply to modern times, the more we understand how right they got things.
Well, and our modern medicine, what we consider modern medicine, actually came about by studying people that were dead and under autopsy.
Right, right. So they didn't know a lot about functional medicine for a long time, and it did. We're finally evolving that information as we're getting, but really in a way as we're getting smaller and smaller into that body universe. but there have been failures too. I mean, some of the mythical stuff about an herb, or we have to study that because some of it is just pure nonsense.
Yeah,
But some of superstition, that kind of stuff, but some of it is
sure.
real, genuine properties. It's like, how did they know that without the stuff we know and have
Well,
available?
and I mean, even with just questioning family members, so about family history. So, say, and this is a true story. So, and I'll do my best to keep it as generic as possible. How's that? So, you have a child that has a condition, and medical science hasn't been able to figure it out. And this family goes to a family reunion where their cousins, uncles, everybody gets together, and the mom is talking with a relative, and they say, "Oh, well, do you know great uncle so and so? He had that back in the 30s, and they just put him on a high fat diet. They use lard." And the mom says, "What have I got to lose? Medical science hasn't been able to help me so far. Let's
uh,
try it." And it worked. So,
then men
for whatever,
can come in and explain how that happened.
right. So then the mom can go back to the specialist and go, "I know this is weird, but this is what we're finding is helping." And so, somewhere in the genetics,
Hmm.
there's likely this issue,
Right.
and it's creating a bigger issue for that particular child. So, knowing and having a sit down with extended family, and
Mhm.
whether it's in person or on Zoom or phoning, and just knowing uh, is very helpful to the overall picture of how do I manage me, how do I manage my family.
Well, that's where community and paying attention and sharing stories is helpful. And that's why we, again, have different books or different experiences, shared stories in some format as far as what happens. The problem is we are currently in an information overload world where lots of people with good intention are putting stuff out there. Some people are being too global, painting with a broad brush, saying, this worked for me, so it must work for everyone. And some people are, for various reasons, putting out misinformation and putting out things that aren't correct or are harmful or incomplete information. I've seen
Mm-hmm.
that sometimes, especially with some celebrities and things, where they're giving important information. They're doing doctor science based information, but they're not doing a lot of the caveats and say if this then that, or in this person only, or they're just making blanket statements which are very misleading and can cause harm. And I've seen that a lot, I'm going to say in the last decade. And so we do have to be discerning. So the average individual is like, well, how do I know what's good information, what's not good information? And in my opinion, and part of that is you and I are like-minded in that we like detective stories. We like to sleuth it out, but not everybody wants that or has that kind of interest. They just want to, like, give it to me, just tell me what I need to do and let
Or
me do it.
they get lost in the
They
can't
get
quite
lost in the
in
minutia
the
or the
minutia. Yeah,
conflicting stories.
yeah,
So what you do is you surround yourself by people that are trustworthy, that are informed. Even if you aren't the expert, you find someone who can be an expert, someone you can trust, someone that you can question, someone that is willing to change their opinion if there's something that's an alternative fact to that. You need people that are not dogmatic and rigid. You need people who go, well, let's see, is there harm in attempting this idea? Is there, like, that's how that other family member could have guided,
sure,
where tell
right,
the doctor and say, is there any harm to us trying this, and these are the benefits, and let's explore why this worked, kind of
right,
thing. And so you want to surround yourself with a team, whether it's friends, family members, or practitioners that can help you
yeah,
determine that. And that's where someone like you and I would come in. When
yeah,
you don't know someone personally, then you go to someone like us.
right.
Mhm.
Well, and I know that you have worked with people not only locally here in the Pacific Northwest, but you know we're really in a great time to be able to connect with technology, and you're more than willing to be on someone's healthcare team that may be in another state, such as Colorado, or
Yeah, yeah.
where it and we have been we have worked with people from all over the country, and more than willing to help if you need some guidance and be able to sit and talk with somebody for longer than 7 minutes, because sometimes I will specifically ask, I want to know the weird. I want to know the what is unusual,
Mhm.
because it often is in those unusual discussions that you get the clues that finally kind of really do connect the dots. And you wouldn't go into the family medical doctor perhaps and say, so this is going on, because then they go, uh-huh, and then it is something that is maybe not as important to them.
Well, and that's that broad brush thing, whereas you want standardization. So you'll go with the common symptoms of something and follow that. And so then you can plug in your protocol with the common symptoms or the
Right.
average that happens. The unique symptoms, like you said, are often an indicator where the individual's genetics, habits, experiences, challenges, whatever's happened with them, make it specific to them. That's a very homeopathic and naturopathic approach,
Well,
because we
it's
do look at that. Sometimes you
it's
can treat
very
with that,
interesting
but
to
not
me
always.
that, because sometimes it's a very significant, to me it's a, I don't think information is insignificant. You have a person that's trusting you to give you this information, and they are essentially laying it all out there for you. And often it is that, oh, by the way, when I lay down to go to sleep at night, my heart races and it's only for 30 seconds. And it's like, whoa, hang on a second. That now,
Well, and that does happen. It can't happen in a 7-minute interview, and you don't usually share weird or odd things about yourself with someone you don't have a relationship with. um, same thing, like you're dating someone, there are habits that you would do when you're living together, scratching places, etc.,
yeah, right?
that you would not do on a date.
No.
So it's the same thing. If you only know someone 7 minutes, you're not going to share those kind of details. And in fact, a lot of nurse practitioners experience that with patients, where they have their interview with the doctor, and then it's kind of like the aside that they tell the nurse, either while they're, because they're looking at each other eye to eye, they're getting their blood pressure, they're being touched, they're being interacted with, even though that could be brief too, but they're doing more with them in person a lot of times, less impersonal. And so then they'll give those little clues, hopefully that gets translated to the chart, hopefully that gets passed on to the doctor, but might not.
Well, I also know in repetition, it will jog someone's memory.
Correct.
I have
And
had this
repetition.
happen where, when I was a responder, first responder, emergency medical technician, I will ask the questions. I ask the same questions. And then they are interviewed, if you will, when the paramedic shows up, and they ask the same questions and they will
Uh-huh.
get more information. And I'm always a bit frustrated by that, because I asked. I didn't forget to ask,
Yeah.
but it gave the patient pause to reflect and go, "Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, by the way." So it's not ever intentional, but it is interesting to me that, in if you ask the same question maybe a little bit differently, you may get an answer,
Mhm.
because the
Mhm.
memory is provoked a little.
Again, research by advertisers shows that repetition will get the brain thinking about something more often, for sure. And that's the another component of that, is when you're looking for something healthy or something that's important for you, a lot of people will unconsciously be aware that if things keep repeating for them, maybe they should pay attention to it. Maybe they should, maybe this is important for them or helpful for them or interesting for them. If you keep hearing about salsa dance, you might be like, maybe I should try salsa dance.
That's the third time I've heard that one.
It's the
Maybe
third
I'm
time I've heard
supposed to
it
go
this
do
week.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right.
So, and I'm kind of like that. It's like if I hear something unusual and I hear it more than once in a fairly short amount of time, I'm like, there's a reason I'm hearing that. Maybe I should pay attention to that. But it could be as simple as I bought a yellow car and now all I see are yellow cars on the road.
Right.
It could be as simple as that too. It's just where you put your attention,
For sure.
right? So we want you to pay attention to your liver and consciously be responsible for your health, do creative things, and to be really aware of what you consume. Be really aware of what you consume on every level. That's the points that I want people to be left with. Liver is regenerative, and it will connect all aspects of your health if you take good care of it.
Thank you so much for your time today, Dr. Grobe. This has been extremely helpful. I will get the list of obscure herbs that I didn't write down, that I hadn't heard of before, and some of the more common ones from you. And we'll put that in the comments of the video so that people have that information, as well as how to be in touch with you for a consult, and me if biofeedback is needed or something like that, that I can lend my services to kinesiology. Occasionally that happens where I'm somewhere and I am able to muscle test somebody or teach them how to muscle test for themselves, which is wonderful, because it's empowering to know how to do that.
Yes, we
I
should
always
all learn how to do
appreciate
those things.
spending time with you and learning more and more and more. And maybe once we've learned everything there is to know about the human body, we can then go on to astrology or astronomy, because the universe is vast.
Universe is vast, and I'm not holding my breath on that. I don't.
No, I think I'll stick with the human body. It's
This
pretty
life.
fascinating.
Yep.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, everybody.